Welcome to the Politico Podcast. I'm Alex Eisenstadt in the Politico newsroom. This week's topics: some hot political primaries taking place across the country, Obama vacations in Martha's Vineyard as Washington enters its August lull, and President Obama and Hillary hug it out. We have a great team of politicos here: White House reporter Carrie Boudif-Brown, media reporter Hadas Gold, and Politico Campaign Pros editor Stephen Shepard. Before we dig deep into some of these topics, let me ask each of you for your headlines of the week. Carrie, starting with you.
No Washington lull. No August lull for Washington. No August lull for Washington, and certainly no vacation for Obama.
Hadas?
Probably Chuck Todd being officially named new host of Meet the Press.
Stephen?
For me, it sort of fits into the no August lull. This is sort of the first week of the general election.
Right.
For the midterm elections. Usually Labor Day would be the traditional kickoff, but we saw both the DCCC and the NRCC go up with their first ads this week.
I'd like to start a little bit. I'd like to start with Carrie and have her talk about, it has been a surprisingly busy time for the president. He's supposedly on vacation, but he's dealing with all these situations, as you referenced. He's dealing with Iraq. He's dealing with a increasingly difficult situation in Missouri. What are the optics like for the president right now as he's dealing with these difficult situations? And what are you hearing from White House people, and how is he handling all of this?
Well, I think this has been his busiest vacation since 2009 when he went on vacation in Hawaii and there was the underwear bomber on the flight to Detroit, and that completely upended his whole vacation. I think this is the busiest I can recall since then for him. I mean, it started with him bombing Iraq, the dust up with Hillary Clinton, which they tried to put to rest last night. And just as they were trying to put that to rest, you had the situation in Ferguson sort of spin out of control. And he's back before the cameras again this morning. I think it's his fourth time he's been in front of the cameras since he was scheduled to be on vacation. And, the White House has a lot of staff are gone. Like, there's not much staff around. They take vacation when he takes vacation, though there's more staff with him in Martha's Vineyard than usual. I think they're a little, they're exhausted by this. They try to treat this as downtime too, and so as the president, he hasn't had his 2 weeks off. A lot of folks have talked about how important the 2 weeks in Hawaii this past year was. It was extraordinarily quiet. He disconnected. It cleared his mind. He's obviously not getting that chance this time.
On Thursday, we saw the president start to weigh in on the situation in Ferguson. Of course, the shooting of an unarmed black teenager. We saw the president weigh in on the Trayvon Martin shooting. Has he changed the way when he has these kinds of discussions with the American people? Has he changed the way he does it when he talks about race? Is it different at all?
Well, I thought the statement Thursday was pretty restrained. It wasn't very emotional like the Trayvon Martin remarks were, both when it happened and then after the jury acquitted Trayvon Martin's shooter. They're definitely not as hesitant as they used to be to weigh in, but you really did in the statement on Thursday see how he's trying to pin the blame on all sides, as opposed to his first sort of infamous remark dealing with the burglary of the professor in suburban Boston, Massachusetts in 2009. How he got into hot water with the police because he was very sort of one-sided in his criticism of that. On Thursday, he said, there's no excuse for looting. There's no excuse for excessive use of force by police, towards anybody. So you could really see him trying to play all sides, and he did not really delve much into the racial aspect of it, like we've seen with these other issues. Even though this is inherently a very sort of difficult issue from a race standpoint, he didn't really weigh into it much Thursday.
Hadas, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the media's coverage of what's going on in Ferguson. It seems to have really grabbed the media's attention. Wesley Lowery, of course, in the news. Ryan Riley from the Huffington Post. What do you make of this? Why is this such a story? What is fascinating to people about this story?
I think what's most fascinating is the juxtaposition of the images coming from down there. You've got police in full SWAT gear. They're riding in more or less military vehicles that can withstand bomb blast. I've seen a lot of images online of putting those images next to ones from Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of comparisons to the protests in the 60s for civil rights in Birmingham and in Memphis. And so I think it's a lot of those images. It's a lot of the fascination lately or in the last few years, with black youths and police brutality and Trayvon Martin. And it just continues that theme that we've seen everyone really grab onto. And it's kind of like, to me, it seems like all of the craziness of the world in the last few weeks has now come to our backyard. And I think that's really what's catching on, because the last few weeks, it's all been in Israel, it's been in Ukraine, it's been elsewhere. And now we're seeing, tear gas being fired at reporters. We're seeing reporters getting advice, and people in Ferguson getting advice on how to deal with tear gas from people in Gaza, from people like in Egypt and places like that, which is just kind of crazy to think about. So I think that's what's really grabbed people. It's kind of insane to see this happening on our own streets.
Steve, the issues that we're talking about this August, whether it's world events in Iraq or in Israel, or perhaps more racially focused events like the one in Missouri, are these issues that are they going to be the same issues that people are thinking about in October and November when they start thinking about who they want to vote for in the midterm elections? Are these issues going to penetrate the public opinion at all?
It's difficult to say. Gallup had a poll pre-Ferguson that came out earlier this week that in which there was some movement on. They asked Americans what the most important problem facing the country was, and there was some movement in foreign policy that more Americans were starting to tune in foreign policy, starting to think it was a bigger problem that they wanted their leaders to deal with. And we are seeing that play out in some of the campaigns that we're looking at. But, I think with the situation in Missouri, we're inside the first week there. Most leaders have had similar reactions on both sides. Both President Obama and Speaker John Boehner had similar statements today. It's a little early to see that having any impact on the trail.
Another big story this week, the President Hillary hugging it out. And Hillary gives an interview to The Atlantic. She seems somewhat critical of the president's foreign policy, how he handles foreign policy. Carrie, how do you read this? And what is the sort of the state of the Obama-Hillary relationship as we start looking toward the 2016 election?
Mm-hmm. Well, I see the state of the relationship. Certainly what they want us all to think is that it's fine. And, I would say between the two of them, it's probably not what we sort of make it out to be, or what is sort of the tumult among the people around them, which is a little more complicated. And certainly they have a complicated relationship. But they're both not newcomers to this game. They know what's going on, that Clinton will have to distance herself to a certain extent. I think that the White House was surprised it happened sort of this soon in sort of such a clear way. I mean, she was very critical of him. She said his, posture towards Syria and arming the rebels was a failure. And it doesn't get any sort of more pointed than that in terms of, I know there's a context to it, but those are, you know what you're doing when you say that. I think there's a certain sense that it wasn't necessarily thought out and calculated by Clinton ahead of time. If you look at the transcript of it, it sort of came at the end of a long conversation about Gaza. So she might have been getting comfortable and just sort of loosened up and talked, which is what, us in the media all want her to do, right? I mean, no one can win in these things. It's a really tough game for both of them.
And at us, we as reporters, we're going to parse every word that comes out of Hillary's mouth, whatever she says about anything, but especially when it comes to when she's discussing the current president, right? I mean, this is what the next year's going to be like.
I mean, this is all, I was talking with Carrie about this earlier, this all just reminds me of middle school when, it was is she going to hug her old friend, at the birthday party? Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And it just seems like the same thing. And, besides the fact that we are ages away from even thinking about the beginning of the presidential election, but we seem to already be in the middle of it, the press is obsessed with this because it's kind of like the pinnacle of all the high powers you could come to. I mean, first of all, Hillary Clinton in and of herself is just a fascinating figure, and all that she's done and all that she's expected to do, and her relationship with Obama will probably be seen as very important because I'm sure you know that without Obama supporters, there's no way that probably Hillary could get elected. And it's just like the palace intrigue, you know, it's the popular kids. Are they friends? Are they not friends? You know, how's this all going to work out? How's this going to affect this next person's popularity? I'm just like having flashes of Mean Girls in my head, and like I'm trying to figure out. I think Obama is maybe Lindsay Lohan's character, and Hillary is maybe Regina George. Maybe, I don't know. Carrie, do you have
Hillary or Regina George? I don't know about that.
Maybe not.
I'm not sure.
We can have a long discussion about
it. We could.
But that's just what it seems like to me. It just seems super like high schooly, middle schooly, especially last night or Thursday night when the White House released their statement about, or their readout about the party, because we in the press were really asking for it, in the middle of everything in Ferguson literally blowing up and the reporters getting arrested. It just was such an interesting juxtaposition to what
But we all love
on.
it because it's the palace intrigue, and we just can't get enough of it. Steve, what are you looking for in terms of Hillary? We're getting a little bit of some sense, a little bit from the Clinton folks, of what they're going to be doing in 2014. Our own Maggie Haberman reported this week for us that Bill Clinton is going to be doing a fundraiser for the DCCC. She hasn't released her schedule yet of the kind of candidates that she wants to campaign for, and this is something that a lot of reporters are interested in. What are you looking for, and when do you think we'll know more from her about her fall campaign schedule?
Probably during September. I think she'll set my sense is a fairly limited schedule of events. She'll maybe campaign for probably fewer than a dozen candidates, probably candidates where an event with her seemingly could make a difference, but probably also candidates who, one of the big themes that we've seen in Bill Clinton's campaign schedule in 2010, 2012, and a little bit in 2014 is he's usually gone to bat for Democrats who were supportive of Hillary Clinton in 2008, even in primaries against Democrats who were supportive of now President Obama in 2008. And I think, you might see a little bit of that. And it'll be interesting the extent to which that's true in 2014 with Hillary's schedule, and whether she continues that theme of backing her supporters from 2008.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, Steve, primaries. We had some big races this last week in Hawaii. Neil Abercrombie, governor, lost, renomination. What are your takeaways from the primaries this week, and what are you going to be looking for in the next couple of weeks as Arizona and some other states head to the polls?
Sure. Hawaii was fascinating. You had Neil Abercrombie try to step up in the post-Inouye era for the Democratic Party. He appointed his lieutenant governor to the Senate when Daniel Inouye passed away in late 2012, rather than Inouye's choice, Congresswoman Colleen Hanabusa. Right now, his man is leading in the latest vote count by about 1,600 votes, and Abercrombie, though, was swept out of office by 36 percentage points. Just a historic loss. Looking ahead to next week, we've got a really consequential Senate primary in Alaska on Tuesday night. Dan Sullivan is the choice of the Republican establishment over Lieutenant Governor Meade Treadwell. But Alaska primaries are weird. They're tough to poll, and he could have some trouble. And then in late August, we've got a big gubernatorial primary in Arizona. Jan Brewer is quasi-term limited and can't run or isn't running. It's a wide-open Republican primary featuring a ton of attacks. There are some consequential House primaries, including in Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick's district, the 1st district, where there are 3 somewhat viable Republican candidates. The Republican establishment is behind one, but really anything can happen in that one, too.
And then, of course, we start the general election phase in earnest as we get into the Labor Day period. Carrie, I want to ask you, what is your sense from when you talk to the White House people? What is their feeling right now about the midterms generally? Are they concerned that if the party is dealt big losses, is there a concern that this could hamper the rest of the presidency? What's your sense from them right now?
Well, there's deep concern about that, and I think they're obviously very fearful of losing the Senate and what that means. It's a difference between, even, 1 or 2 seats, even a tie where you have Biden making, breaking ties. It's just a huge difference. It's the difference between him vetoing tons of bills because McConnell and Boehner will just send up everything and they'll make him veto a ton of stuff. Investigations, they don't want that. They, despite all of their provoking provocation of Republicans on executive actions. Like, Obama doesn't really care for that kind of stuff. So, so they're concerned. And I think we're going to start seeing that. I think something that people need to watch for is how the president handles his pledge to do executive actions on immigration. I think we'll be able to tell a lot from how the White House views their chances in November through how they handle that decision, how broad they go when they make the announcement, if they only do half the announcements now and do the tougher stuff after November. There's a lot of questions and a lot of behind-the-scenes talks right now on what that action means for the 2014ers who are up in the Senate, who could mean the difference between losing the Senate and keeping the Senate. And it's really coming down to, very severe concerns about what it means to lose the Senate.
And one more question for you on the midterms. What role do you think the president is going to play? I mean, as we head into September, October, is he going to be out there on the trail? Is he going to be the attack dog? His approval rating is around 40%, I think, in the last NBC poll. So what role does he play?
We don't know what the messaging will be. It will certainly, he will not be out there. He will not be campaigning for any of the people who will decide whether the Senate stays in Democratic hands. Certainly not in their states. He'll be raising money. He's committed to more fundraisers. That's the best and really only use of his time other than making sure government is run competently and without crisis. And those are like the two things that he can do, and I don't see them doing much more than that.
Hadass, I wanted to ask you about some pretty big media news that I know you've been writing about a little bit this week. Chuck Todd potentially taking over for Meet the Press could be a big switchover at a Washington institution. Tell me a little bit about that. What is your latest reporting on that? What happens to David Gregory, and what is the situation?
We are 90-something% sure that he will be announced as the next host of Meet the Press either Thursday afternoon, so could be right now, or tomorrow morning. We're pretty sure this is happening. The story broke early this week by our own Mike Allen, who said that this was probably going to happen the next few weeks. That might have sped up the process at NBC for their announcement. NBC has not made any type of statement to anybody's reporting about the hosting change, which gives you the signal that this is what's going to happen. And it is a big change for Meet the Press. It's a big change for the Sunday shows, but also not really, because Chuck is just another white male expert in politics who's going to be hosting a Sunday show. But he is different. He's come up the ranks in a different way than I think other people. He came from Hotline. And he is obsessed with politics in a much different way than David Gregory was. And he has like an encyclopedic knowledge of politics. He treats it like sports, which he also is obsessed with.
Right.
He has been described to me by some of his close friends as a salesman, but in a positive way. Like he wants the viewers to love politics as much as he does. He wants them to love the policy as much as he does, and that they think he's going to do a better job in terms of connecting to the viewer and making. Hopefully, they would hope that the Sunday shows will become more important to people with Chuck Todd there, and it's a big moment. It's a pinnacle in his career. As for David Gregory, I'm sure we're still going to see him around. Not entirely sure if he will stay at NBC. I believe that he might in some way, but we'll probably see him kind of fade into the background in the same way we've seen happen to Diane Sawyer and some of these other once big names.
Time for some shout-outs. We'll go quick around the table. I'd like to hear from each of you on anything you recommend, if it's a book or an article that you've read or a movie you've seen or a restaurant, as we head into the weekend. Carrie, starting with you.
I think it's best to start with Steven.
I think it's best to start with Steve, too.
All right, I'm gonna be shameless here and to continue on the Hotline theme. First of all, I am a former very briefly, Hotline Editor-in-Chief, so I would congratulate Chuck, fellow Hotline Editor-in-Chief. And I and the current Hotline Editor-in-Chief, Scott Bland, will be interviewing Stephanie Shriak, the president of Emily's List, this weekend on C-SPAN Newsmakers. Check your local listings for that one.
And Hadass?
I'm going to go completely unrelated to news. Last night I went to this great Ethiopian restaurant in Adams Morgan called Karen Ethiopian. Super casual place, doesn't have really nice decorations, Great food, super cheap. The owners are all really awesome and nice, and the place was packed. And our own Sarah Wheaton, a healthcare reporter, was there at the same time I was, so clearly Politico likes this place.
Little Politico reunion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give a shout out to the weather gods. I'm going to the beach next week in North Carolina. Be kind to me.
All right, vacation alert.
Vacation alert.
I'm going to recommend everyone read the Tampa Bay Times profile about Charlie
Oh,
Crist.
that's so good.
It's a great story. They've interviewed something like 100 people, and there are just all kinds of great details about the former governor who could be the next governor of the great state of Florida.
Don't ever let him stay at your hotel.
Don't ever let him stay at your hotel. He might ruin your room. He might spill red wine on the carpeting. And if you're going to have a meal with Charlie Crist, just expect him to not eat any bread. If you want to know more about that, read the story. It's a great one. Carrie, Hadass, and Steve, thank you for coming on. If you want to know even more about some of the issues that we talked about today, head to politico.com. You can find us at politico.com/podcast. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud too. Just search Politico Podcast. I'm Alex Eisenstadt, and thank you for listening.